Your phone is ringing. You answer it. There's breathing on the other end, then a voice. And the voice knows your name. It knows where you work. It knows what you were wearing today. It knows what time you left your house this morning. It knows things that only someone watching you very closely, very carefully, very patiently would know. You hang up. The phone rings again. This happened to a woman named Dorothy Jane Scott every week for months. And then one night the call stopped because Dorothy Jane Scott disappeared. And 4 years later, when investigators finally found her remains in a drainage ditch in Orange County, California, the call started again from the same voice, who has never been identified, who may still be alive. Dorothy Jane Scott was 22 years old in 1979. She lived in Stanton, California with her young son Sean, who was 4 years old at the time. She worked as a secretary for a company called Swingers Psych Shop in Anaheim. It was a costume and novelty store. Her coworkers described her as quiet, reliable, and deeply devoted to her son. She was not someone who attracted attention. She was not involved in anything dangerous. She was an ordinary young woman living an ordinary life, and someone had decided to make her the center of their obsession. Calls began in early 1979. They came to Dorothy's workplace. The caller always asked for her by name. When she picked up, the voice told her that she was his, that he had been watching her, that she was more beautiful than she knew, that one day he was going to take her, and she would never see her family again. Dorothy reported the calls to police. The calls were logged, documented, taken seriously enough to generate paperwork. But in 1979, the technological infrastructure to trace anonymous calls in real time did not exist in the way it does today. There were no cell towers generating location data. There were no digital records of call origins that could be subpoenaed in minutes. If the caller used different payphones, which the evidence suggests he did, finding him required physical surveillance of Dorothy herself, which the department did not have the resources to maintain indefinitely. The calls continued. On the night of May 28, 1979, Dorothy was working late with two co-workers, a man named Conrad Bostron and a woman named Patty. Conrad had been feeling unwell during the shift. He had what appeared to be a spider bite on his arm that had become swollen and infected. Dorothy insisted on taking him to the hospital. The three of them drove to the UC Irvine Medical Center. Conrad was treated. The bite was cleaned and dressed. The medical staff said he would be fine. Dorothy pulled her car to the front of the hospital entrance to pick up Conrad and Patty, who were waiting at the door. She told them she needed to check on something and got out of the car briefly. Conrad and Patty waited. The car remained running at the front entrance. Dorothy did not come back. Conrad and Patty waited for several minutes. Then they went back inside to look for her. She was not in the hospital. She was not in the parking lot. She was not anywhere they could find. They called police. Police searched the hospital and surrounding area. Dorothy Jane Scott was gone, and then the phone rang at her mother's house. Dorothy's mother answered. The voice on the other end told her that he had Dorothy, that he had finally taken her like he promised he would, that Dorothy was his now. Then he hung up. Investigators immediately refocused the missing persons case as a potential abduction. They traced Dorothy's car. It was found the next morning burned to its frame on a road in Santa Ana, completely destroyed. No fingerprints, no physical evidence, no witnesses who had seen it being driven or set on fire. Just a burned out shell where Dorothy's ordinary life had been. The investigation that followed was thorough by the standards of the time. Investigators interviewed everyone who knew Dorothy, her co-workers, her family, her neighbors, her son's father, anyone who might have had a grievance or an obsession. Nothing produced a viable suspect. The anonymous caller had been careful. Payphones, no recorded voice, no witnesses to any of the calls being made, no physical evidence connecting any individual to Dorothy's disappearance. And then the call started again, not to the police, not to Dorothy's workplace, to Dorothy's mother. For 4 years, Dorothy's mother received calls from the same voice. Sometimes the calls came weekly. Sometimes there were gaps of months. The voice told her things about Dorothy, things that suggested intimate knowledge of what had happened to her, things that could not have been guessed. The voice taunted her, described Dorothy in ways designed to cause maximum psychological damage to a mother who did not know if her daughter was dead or alive. Dorothy's mother recorded every call she could, reported every call to investigators, cooperated completely and consistently with every aspect of the investigation. The caller was never traced. And then in August of 1984, a construction crew working in a flood control channel in Orange County found human remains. The remains were identified as Dorothy Jane Scott. Forensic analysis determined she had been dead since shortly after her disappearance in May of 1979. She had not been held captive for 4 years. She had been dead for 4 years, which meant that every call her mother had received during those 4 years, every taunting call, every description of Dorothy, every calculated cruelty delivered down a telephone line had come from someone who knew exactly what had happened to Dorothy, because they had been responsible for what happened to Dorothy. And 3 weeks after the remains were identified and the identification was made public, Dorothy's mother received another call. The voice told her that he had read about the identification in the newspaper. He expressed no remorse. He expressed satisfaction. He told her that they would never find him. Then he hung up. It was the last call Dorothy's mother ever received from that number. Here is what investigators know. Dorothy Jane Scott was abducted from UC Irvine Medical Center on the night of May 28, 1979. Her car was found burned the following morning. Her remains were found in a drainage channel in August 1984. Anonymous calls were made to her family from before her disappearance until after her remains were identified. The caller demonstrated knowledge of Dorothy's daily routine, her appearance, and ultimately of her death that could only have come from direct involvement in what happened to her. No suspect was ever charged. No suspect was ever publicly identified. The case remains officially unsolved. Here is what investigators do not know: who made the calls, how he had access to the information he demonstrated in those calls, whether he called other victims, whether he is still alive. And here is the detail that the case file contains that has never been fully explained publicly. Investigators in the original case noted that the caller appeared to have knowledge of Dorothy's movements on the night of her disappearance that suggested either he was present at the hospital or he had a source inside the hospital who was providing him information in real time. The hospital employee angle was investigated. It produced no confirmed result, but the investigation notes from that period, some of which have been accessed through public records requests by journalists covering the case, suggest that investigators did identify a person of interest connected to the hospital who could not be definitively ruled out. That name has never been released. Dorothy Jane Scott's son Sean was 4 years old when his mother disappeared. He grew up without her. He has spoken publicly about the case as an adult, about growing up knowing that whoever took his mother was never held accountable, about the particular kind of damage that an unsolved case does to the people left behind. Not just the absence of answers, the presence of a question that never closes. Every unsolved case leaves something behind. Not just grief, not just anger, a door that cannot be shut because nobody knows what is on the other side of it. Dorothy Jane Scott's door has been open for 45 years, and somewhere, possibly the person who opened it is still alive, still aware of what he knows, still the only one who could close it. That is the most disturbing thing about this case. Not what happened, but that someone knows exactly what happened and has chosen for 45 years to say nothing, except to a mother on a telephone, in the dark. If cases like Dorothy's, the ones that mainstream true crime never covers properly, the ones where the questions are still open and the answers are still out there, are what you come here for, then subscribe, because there are more doors that have not been closed, and we are going to open every one of them.